Hello, I'm Chris Rush with Off to Class, and I'm really excited to share with you the next step in our step-by-step curriculum. This is Unit 15, and for this unit, we're going to be talking about your life, which contains a lot of functional language. So let's get right into what's contained in these lessons. So in the first lesson, and what we're going to be discussing today, the objective is to talk about your routine and the things that you do regularly. And we're going to be talking about this with adverbs of frequency. So by the end of this first lesson, students should be able to talk about their routines using basic adverbs of frequency. So as you continue to work with the present simple, just keep focusing on that third person singular with the S on it because it's still going to be tricky for students at this level. And when you're introducing adverbs of frequency, it's always helpful to use a visual presentation of a spectrum. So depending on the students, don't be afraid to introduce other expressions because we use expressions like this all the time in English, now and then, once a week, every day. It's really great to use a timeline like this. It would be great to use the Canvas feature where you can see which phrases that your student knows along this spectrum. And then you can add in, some of the ones that are on the slide, but also others that are really commonly used. So as a teacher, be aware that the rule around the position of adverbs of frequency they're artificial, but it's important for students to understand the two typical positions, which is after the conjugated form with be and before other verbs. So in daily use, we use adverbs of frequency in various positions around the sentence, and the rules really only apply to their use in positive sentences, so it's something to be aware of when you're going over this with your students. In the next lesson, the objective is to talk about technology, and we're going to be using have for possessions. So at the end of this lesson, students will be able to talk about the things they have and own. And have will still be problematic for many students at this level, especially third person singular where it switches to has. As a teacher, listen for students who get the sounds confused when using all of the different forms of have. Students can very often confuse the contracted forms of things like there is, he has, she's, etc. So just make sure that you're doing writing and reading activities so they can see the different forms and use the contracted forms and also use the long forms so they get used to saying, speaking, and seeing both along all parts of the spectrum. This is also a really good time to look at the pronunciation of connected speech in the question form of have. So since we use have with possessions, it's a good opportunity to ask questions with these verbs and to focus on the pronunciation of do and does. So it's different in the question form, right? Do you have? Does she have? So make sure that your students are comfortable with those changes. In the third lesson, the objective is to make arrangements. And we're going to be talking about some helpful vocabulary to organize a meeting or appointment. And by the end of the lesson, students should be able to use vocabulary in context to make arrangements. So making arrangements and appointments is one of the earliest, most beginner things that students can do that is really functional and really helps your students feel independent. So for many beginners, using English for the first time to do something like make a reservation at a restaurant or arrange to meet somebody for coffee can be very motivating and can give students that first time experience of, oh, I'm really using this language to accomplish something in the real world. So don't underestimate how important role playing is in situations like these, because you really want your students to use the language in an authentic a way as possible, and that means making those arrangements and practicing with you as the teacher. So when you're doing this, encourage the use of set phrases like let's and why don't we and how about. And of course, make sure that students are able to make alternative suggestions if the initial suggestion is refused. So if you say, how about we meet for coffee at 6? Make sure your student knows what to say if somebody responds with, "Oh, I'm busy at 6," for example. And so whenever you do these kinds of functional language lessons with your students, be prepared to act it out. And the fourth lesson in this sequence is about writing an informal invitation. And at the end of the lesson, students will be able to write a short and informal invitation to a social event. So along with spoken arrangements, it's also very important to be able to write, for example, emails effectively. And at this elementary level, the teacher should focus on structure. So even in informal writing, the structure should be clear and every sentence should have a purpose. Try not to overload students with too many greetings and salutations. It's better that the student just knows how to use one formal greeting and salutation and one informal greeting, as well as when it comes to how to sign off on an email. And so you can see on the slide, we've got a good example of how to do this with your students. So we're releasing this next set of 4 lessons into the content library in our sequenced curriculum, and we're really excited to be able to use these with your students. And of course, we want to hear your feedback. In the meantime, make sure that you keep coming back, and we're going to keep releasing videos along with new content about the lessons we're releasing, but also about other teaching related topics. And we'll see you in the next one.